Women's suffrage was a step in the right direction, but it would take decades to see the slightest changes that benefited her, from employment, pay, maternity leave, and so on. Here to help further break down the legal changes / improvements for women is Nekki Shutt, partner at Burnette Shutt McDaniel. It's good to see you.
Hi, Leyla.
We appreciate you weighing in on this because, of course, the 19th Amendment being ratified, that was just but one step 100 years ago. But as we all know, it took decades for more rights to become law for women. So what would you say were some of the biggest changes that we've seen over the course of the last 100 years?
Well, certainly the 19th Amendment was a step in the right direction. I mean, and we're about to celebrate the 100th anniversary of that. In South Carolina, it's a little bit different, though. South Carolina was not one of the states that originally ratified the 19th Amendment. It took us decades longer until 1969 to ratify the amendment. Of course, on August 26, 1920, it became the law of the land. But South Carolina likes to be last, and so we were last to do that. When the 19th Amendment was finally certified on August 26, 1920, 26 million women got the right to vote. However, women south of the Mason-Dixon line still had problems voting, and it would take many years. It would be until the 1950s and the 1960s, until the Voting Rights Act and until Title VII of the 1964 passed, that women actually got the right to vote equally. Native American women, women of color.
That's incredible. It's amazing that it took that much longer for individual states, and that's something that we can't forget, because while you say it became the law of the land, certain states, they could take their time on these issues. Some of the other issues, things like birth control, contraception, things like minimum wage. In 1938, the Fair Labor Standards Act established a minimum wage without regard to sex. So for South Carolina, where did minimum wage and pay start coming into play for women in the workplace?
Well, we still follow the national minimum wage. A lot of states have been proactive and have increased the minimum wage, but in South Carolina, we follow the national minimum wage. So our minimum wage is still $7.55 an hour. It has not increased in, I think, about 15 years now.
Okay.
Women still make about 76 cents per every dollar that men make. So the 19th Amendment, while it gave women the right to vote, it certainly did not, it helped close the economic gap. It helped women get into jobs. Women still only serve in Congress. About 25% of the women, 25% of the seats in Congress are filled by women.
Right. And moving on to another right, which is to serve on a jury. So it no longer became 12 angry men. Women could then become part of that, but that didn't happen. That didn't happen until close to 1950. It was in 1947. So where did South Carolina fall into that?
Yeah, South Carolina, again, that became the law of the land then. But I mean, we have a lot of laws, that the South generally, behind the Mason-Dixon line, was slow to follow. Just like Brown versus Board of Education, it had to be federal actors coming in and making some of the southern states do that.
Okay. How about divorce? In California, for instance, in 1968, they adopted the nation's first no-fault divorce law. Does that exist here in the South? I know a lot of states do it differently.
Yes. In South Carolina, we have you can have 1 year continuous separation to have a divorce, or there's grounds that either party can use, like adultery, intoxication, mental health status. But there's still a double-edged sword when it comes to women seeking divorce, because if you want to get any type of alimony, you have to have been together for 10 years. And if the person committing adultery does not get any alimony, and by and large, that typically impacts the woman more than the man, because generally still it's the man who is the breadwinner. So if he's out having an adulterous affair, it doesn't stop him from having to pay alimony. If the woman who works at home, takes care of the family, is out having an affair, she does not get alimony. So it disproportionately affects women. I probably didn't say that very well, but yeah, right.
Law can be very convoluted, though. I mean, it's very difficult to read a law book for sure. Well, this is a perfect place to take a break, because when we come back after the commercial, I want to talk about where we still need to go and maybe some of the improvements that still await us as a nation and as a state. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We've been chatting with Nekki Shutt, partner at Burnette Shutt McDaniel. We've been talking about the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment, but the decades that it took to get more rights for women. And Nekki, we left it on one note as far as divorce is concerned for women here in South Carolina, but let's talk about health care, because health is a major component, and especially for working moms. So maybe you can tell us a little bit more about where we stand on these issues.
Sure. So, that is still one of the biggest things that women are still fighting for, is reproductive rights and choice rights. Just if you track South Carolina, since 2005, there have been 99 pieces of legislation at the South Carolina General Assembly that would negatively impact a woman's right to choose or her reproductive freedom. So it is a hotly contested issue. It's a red meat voter issue.
Right. And how about for women who do choose to have a family and to work? I know a big legislation that was being worked on is having a safe, clean place to express milk if you're breastfeeding your child.
Yes, that's good news that's happened recently. So now employers are required to give women who are breastfeeding a safe place to breastfeed their baby. So that's great news.
Now, where do we go from here? What's next? I know the pay gap is still one thing. There's more equality in terms of labor, in terms of women taking on certain jobs. We've had them on the show. We've had someone heading up the Women's Association for Construction Workers and so forth. So where do we need to go from here?
I think we still need to shatter that glass ceiling. It would be wonderful to have a woman in the White House. So having Kamala Harris as the vice presidential nominee for the Democratic Party, if she gets chosen, that would be shattering a giant glass ceiling. We need to get to a pay equity area. We need to stop fighting about a woman's right to choose. We need to stop fighting over reproductive freedom. We need to get more representation, more people at the table, more women running for office, more women elected to office, more women running companies.
Absolutely. And let's, of course, not forget to champion our Governor Nikki Haley, who became the first female and minority governor of South Carolina. So while we have broken some glass ceilings, there's still more to break. I want to thank you so much, Ms. Shutt, for joining us today.
My pleasure.